Hey guys, this is Erica Settlin, and I am doing a teacher spotlight today with Mrs. Kristin Howell. And I will let her elaborate on her position and introduce herself in just a moment. And we're going to talk about some transformative experiences and deeper learning and next gen learning that she utilizes in her classroom to have maximum growth and performance out of her students over her pathway courses that she offers. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Howell before we get started.
Hi, I'm Kristin Howell. I've been teaching at Martha Lane Collins High School for the past 9 years. This is my ninth year. Primarily, I teach PLTW, Project Lead the Way, Biomedical Sciences. I've taught the Human Body Systems course, medical interventions, biomedical innovations, and also AP biology. And yeah.
So you have been here 9 years. Just to kind of lay the landscape, how has your instruction changed from that first time that you stepped into a classroom to now? And as far as maybe your philosophy there in that work?
Yeah, I can't think of like a single transformative experience. It's really just been kind of the blessing of time. Just year after year getting to like refine my craft and recognize what works in my classroom, what works with students, getting to just know my content better and seeing that improve from year to year. So it really is like just an experience thing. Again, like refining my lessons every single year. Even though I have the luxury of probably just hitting print on like an old quiz or an old worksheet or something, I do try and take a look at everything I've done from year to year and really refine it for what we're doing currently. So yeah, I think that's been time.
I agree. I feel the same way about my position when I was a culinary teacher, and my position now is that you just need time in the work to know what you don't know. So I think that that's a huge thing too. And I think it's good for students to see us struggle a little bit with that, because that helps them kind of in their own growth process, knowing that they're not experts either. And we're getting to expert level and some things and maybe not in other things. So that's a really good point.
Exactly. We're doing, to elaborate on that, we're doing a project this year, and they've changed my curriculum slightly for my medical interventions class. And they've added in this new segment where students have to talk about a certain type of cancer therapy. And I've never taught it before. So this year, they're asking me questions and I'm like, I don't know, I'm learning it with you. Let's Google this together. Let's do this together. So already like next year, I'm making the plans in my head for how are we going to restructure this. And I'm already feeling more comfortable with the content even after just a couple days.
And I love when they sometimes discover something for us, which happens sometimes by happenstance and sometimes intentionally. But when they do that research piece, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you found this for me. Because you have 18 busy worker bees looking for information rather than just yourself. So, and different perspectives. So awesome. Moving on from there, going to the time piece and how you've learned about different strategies. What strategies specifically would you say that you would cite as pillars of success in the way that your classroom operates to meet student needs?
One thing that I've started doing a lot this year and a lot more intentionally as our school uses the workshop model is reflection. Spending some time at the end of class, or even not at the end of class, just in the middle of class, and really constantly kind of formatively assessing and getting student feedback, both in terms of how they feel with the content, their comfort level with the content, and one second. And
Hey, this is teaching life. That's what the normal. That's just how it is.
Their comfort level with the content, and also like process wise, how did this activity work for you? How did you like this? How should I adjust this? So adding in that reflection piece, I think, has helped them as students, assessing their own growth and their own performance, but also it really, really helps me as a teacher to, again, refine my lessons. Other than reflection, we use a lot of remediation, which I think is helpful for students because a lot of kids just don't get it right the first time. And once they figure out what they did wrong, they get that second chance. I've also tried to be more intentional this year with adding in more student discourse, letting them communicate the work with each other and help each other through the work, instead of just like, here's your assignment, sit down and do it quietly by yourself, really getting the opportunity to discuss stuff together and share information together. Those strategies this year have been really helpful.
Do you ever find it's hard to find that balance or boundary where it is actual structured student discourse as opposed to sharing answers, and you do this one and I'm going to do this one. They were all going to swap after, because I think that that's a hard balance. And I think that's why a lot of teachers are resistant to having as much student
Mhm.
discourse, because sometimes it can lead to just completion and sharing of answers rather than sharing of the process and the gaining of that knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, the struggle of staying on topic. And whenever I've asked them, like, oh, whether I've let them pick their own small groups or even like jigsawed it as a class, you have those students that are like, I want to make sure I know the information, so I'm going to do it all myself, and I'm not going to rely on my classmates to discuss with them. So it's kind of exhausting in the sense, just like proctoring a test, you constantly have to be monitoring the room, constantly have to be kind of walking around to encourage them to like talk to each other, and what did this person say and how does your answer relate to this person. So yeah, it's a struggle. It's, if I were to just release it and be like, okay, talk to someone about this, it would not happen. So structuring it, I think, really helps, with time limits, making sure, for 2 minutes we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to share, and then we're going to switch. So when I've been a little bit more structured with it and been more diligent around the room, it's been a lot more successful.
And I'm sure as the year goes on, the ability for them to open up. I mean, of course, the beauty of being a previous pathway teacher, and I know obviously you run your pathway and have for 9 years, is that you have those recurring relationships that you
Mhm.
can just continue to nurture rather than just cultivating from scratch. And that's, something that's a luxury, I feel like, in pathways. But of course, you do always have a new crop of students every year, even if it's just 1 or 2 periods. So I'm sure as the year goes on, they're way more comfortable, and there's a lot more of that natural conversation that has to happen, or can happen, excuse me, without your interference necessarily, as got to, they kind of know the drill, I guess you could say, at some point. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
When it comes to lesson planning, how do you go about that instructional process or planning process? Do you backward plan? Do you, because your units obviously might look a little bit different with what PLTW requires to be a PLTW educator. How does that look for you to create a deeper learning experience?
Yeah, it is pretty structured with the lessons from PLTW, in terms of what they want you to give to kids, but there's a lot of flexibility in like the order in which I could do things, and you can take certain liberties with how you want certain projects to go. So again, that's that time piece. I have kind of refined that over the years. Um, but in terms of lesson planning, I'm a planner. I have like in my head, I'm always like working 1 week in advance. And I think that benefits students because I'm always able to contextualize for them. I don't know. To me, it seems like it would benefit them. They probably don't even notice it.
Mhm.
But to me, it helps me contextualize the lesson. So I start every lesson by saying, like, here's what we did yesterday. Here's what we learned. Here's what we're focusing on today. And like, here's what we're doing in the upcoming several days. It's probably overwhelming for them, but the other day I literally pulled up a calendar and I was like, here's what we're doing for the next 2 weeks. So here's how what we're learning today is going to affect you tomorrow. Here's why this learning is important, because you're going to need this to move on to the steps we're doing in subsequent days. So in my mind, that type of planning helps them. I don't know how useful it actually is for them, but yeah, I like to be very explicit about what's coming up and what we're learning. Also, in terms of lesson planning, our district promotes the workshop model, which is very much how I structure things. So starting off with that learning target, that contextualization. Usually PLTW, we start off with some sort of engaging scenario or like introduction to our lessons, and then give them some background, usually model for them some aspect of the activity, give them time to craft and compose. And during that crafting composing time, I built in time, of course, to like check in on their work, to do any catch and release if students are struggling with something. With that reflection piece, I can go in and like modify my lesson mid class or for subsequent classes if needed, and then end that lesson with reflection.
I think that's really important too, because it builds that transference of skills, right? So, like, regardless of what class they're in, I think structuring that schedule, like you're talking about, and that's how I very much ran my life. Well, I still do, but in the classroom, especially, was because I wanted them to understand that this was working towards a bigger goal. These are those baby step goals that we're going to, continue to work on so that we can get to this big piece and this big picture, and it becomes, one thing. And no matter what they do for a living, they're going to need that kind of project management and planning mindset no matter what they do, even if they go straight to the workforce, like if they're going to be successful, if they're ever going to move above entry level positions, they're going to have that. And I think that relevance and that awareness and that ability to assess what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and why it needs to be done on this time frame is super important, and leads perfectly into the next question, because I can't imagine another person in this building that represents authenticity about like audience and relevance to student learning. Because I mean, of course, I know you and have worked with you for 7 years that I've been here, and just constantly thinking about how amazing it is that your kids see their work come to life. And it's not one time a year. It's not a project oriented learning environment where it's like, we did all the hard stuff. Now we get one project that's fun at the end. And then people that really matter will see it. It's really seems to be embedded as part of the culture of your classroom, that there's always that authentic audience that is awaiting that next project completion, if that makes sense. So going into that, how do you ensure the authenticity and the relevance and the partnerships and the networking that you do on your side so that you can share that with students?
PLTW again is really great about kind of designing their lessons to make sure that the activities that the kids are doing, the skills that they're learning, are authentic to what's happening in healthcare and in medicine. So that's really great on their part. And I always do what I can to let students again know, like, this is why we're doing this activity, because you're actually going to come across this in the real world. So I try and make sure that they know that what they're doing is authentic and relevant. One class that I do a lot of this with is my biomedical innovations class, which is the capstone class for seniors. And like you said, every kind of big project that we do throughout the year, I always try and like tailor the audience of their final project to what they're doing. So of course, it's been a little crazy over the past couple of years, but
Oh, you don't say.
yeah, I'm like, I haven't done this in the past 2 years, but under normal circumstances, like when they had to build an emergency room, I would invite in people who, nurses, doctors. I actually paired them up with professionals who worked in emergency medicine or who were nurses or medical malpractice lawyers. So during their project, they can communicate with professionals. Another project that I've done in previous years, they had to develop a community action plan to benefit one aspect of a community, kind of health wise or public health wise. And I've brought in like a panel of individuals from the community to kind of offer them feedback, who they would present that to. So like you said, I try and make sure that whatever their final product is, they're presenting to an audience other than just students, or other than just their classmates. Like even one project I had them presenting to like 6th, 7th, 8th graders from the middle school, across the way, just so they can present their information to also different levels of audiences, so they can get used to communicating with individuals who know more than them, and they can also communicate with individuals who know less than them. So they're working on kind of modifying the communication with their audience.
And I'm sure that improves engagement, I would assume, with that work, because you don't necessarily have to battle for the value as much. Like you don't have to, I mean, there's always going to be the kids that are a little bit more resistant because you're challenging them and you're, pushing them outside of maybe their comfort zone. But it was like, you can't ever tell me in culinary that you're never going to bake a cookie. So my friends, let's pay attention. So I'm sure it is kind of similar in your role, where it's like, you might have children one day, you might work in this profession one day, you might have a family member who is ill and you might need to think about these things, or you might have to open a home like health center, if you will, like to maybe your grandparent comes in and lives with you all because in her age she can't go to a nursing home or doesn't want to or whatever. Like health is everything, as well. If we didn't already know that, we definitely know it now. So I'm sure that's been helpful for them to feel engaged by.
And that's honestly one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is whenever a student comes into me saying, "Miss Howell, I was at the doctor's office and I knew exactly what they were talking about because of your class." Or literally students will like bring me their like x-ray images or like scans of their MRIs. Or one student was like, "Oh, so and so, posted their x-ray on Twitter and I knew exactly what kind of fracture that was." So to see students like getting excited about their knowledge and kind of building that capacity and that independence that they can like go out in the real world and like feel confident and comfortable in healthcare settings because of the knowledge they picked up on my class. So to see that is just the most rewarding thing that I could ask for.
And not to work backwards, because I hate that I didn't ask you this at the very beginning when you were doing your introduction, but can you also speak a little bit to your background before you became an educator? Because I personally, for me, that was a huge impact in the way I crafted my instruction. So if you don't mind to speak to that, because I think that that also is a representation of that transformative aspects of your work too.
Absolutely. And I think that definitely plays a part into how, how I function as a teacher. So I actually started kind of in the industry after college, after undergrad. I went to the University of Kentucky to pursue a PhD in behavioral neuroscience and psychopharmacology. So I was very kind of like research and academia oriented. I collected data, ran experiments, published papers, did posters and conferences. And then it was 3 years into that program, I realized that like my true calling was to be a teacher. And so I very much bring that authentic science experience into the classroom. So the way that we craft lab reports, I very much tell them like, you're not writing a high school lab report, like you're writing a paper as if you're going to publish it in a journal. And in terms of making, posters, I'm like, this isn't your little, trifold fifth grade science fair project. Like we're making a poster that you could actually present at like a conference if you wanted. So my background kind of in the field and in the industry, I definitely think has benefited these students and helped give them a little bit more of an authentic experience into like, what research actually looks like and what science actually looks like.
And setting that bar high so that it feels easier later. I think that's what we all as teachers try to do, because we know what's coming for kids. And I don't know that they quite grasp what's coming for them in the real world, and especially when you're trying to balance adulthood with it in those pursuits. So I think that that's a huge deal, and thankful that you offer that, because it does everything for kids. It makes it a holistic experience, not an isolated occurrence in their life, for sure. Moving on to that, talking about kind of future things and innovative changes and maybe some pushback that you may have personally experienced or seen building wide. How do you engage or facilitate or support the school culture and climate on the front of, let's be more innovative, let's lead to deeper learning opportunities, this is how you can do it, this is an easy starting point, don't be overwhelmed, like let me show you how I do it? What do you do to help kind of inspire and support that work?
I don't know that I
Don't
do.
sell yourself short.
I mean, like
Lab classroom, lab
I
classroom.
I will say that Shelby County Public Schools and Collins High School are very supportive and very encouraging of innovation. So they make it very easy. And we have a great set of like instructional coaches who admittedly, push me to do more of this stuff. So I just, when an opportunity arises, try to be a leader. Try to, again, as a lab classroom, welcome teachers into my classroom. Share any opportunities that I'm doing. So like if we're doing exhibitions or something, I try and like recruit other teachers, even in just like casual conversations with other teachers. If they're doing something really interesting, I'm like, oh, we should collaborate on that. My students are doing this. So anytime I can see some crossover with my curriculum and other teachers, I try and have that conversation. So maybe together we can kind of do something more innovative. But yeah, I don't know, try and model it as best as possible. And I really do take the lead from our instructional coaches and kind of administration we have in the district that really promote it. So I feel very well supported with that as well. And I try and stay positive, and I try and be, a good teammate. Public education is not easy. And there can be some teachers with very like pessimistic, negative attitudes towards things. It's really easy to like go down that slippery slope. So whenever like innovative ideas are kind of like, I don't want to say pushed on us, but whenever the district tries to like encourage something new, I try and approach it with an open mind, recognizing that me complaining isn't going to do anything. So I try and be on board for the most part, or approach things with an open mind, recognizing that someone somewhere along the line saw this as beneficial and saw this as logical. So I'm going to give it a try and, do what I can do. And if I could figure it out, then I'm going to try and encourage my colleagues to to maybe come on board with it as well, instead of complaining about it in the copy room.
Yeah, that's a
I'm
very
not trying to be negative about any colleague.
no, but we all know because we get into those ruts, because we're always doing all the things for all the people all the time. And it is hard to think about one more thing being added to the plate. And I understand that. But I think what you said at the very beginning is the most crucial part, is that you're modeling it. So you wouldn't be asking someone to be a guinea pig or to try something out if you weren't already in that work, or at least trying that work yourself. And I think as long as people feel that connectivity of like we're all working towards it, or we're all trudging through in the struggling of the learning process together, then you feel like, okay, it's worth it. But if you're an isolated, you feel like you're on an island, and there's no follow up, there's no support, there's no kind of feedback as part of the work, it's just do it, then that doesn't, bring value to anybody. And we wouldn't want to do that to kids. So we wouldn't want to do it to teachers. So I feel like you got to model. Otherwise people are like, yeah, okay, sure. So I agree. Moving on from that, the last question I have for you is kind of, where do you see the landscape of your classroom, of your instruction, of our building culture, innovation wise, whatever that may be, like perfect picture or realistic picture in the next couple of years, even though if somebody asked that a couple of years ago, that would not obviously have panned out. So it's hard to say that now with the perspectives we have. But where do you see your program building or growing or expanding, or things you might want to try in the future for the school or for your classes?
Yeah, at this point, it's just normalcy. So we're striving for normalcy. But no, our program has been very strong for the past couple of years, and capacity wise, I think we have good numbers. I really want to see it grow into our middle schools and eventually our elementary schools, so we can have a whole kind of cohesive storyline. I don't necessarily want to say pathway, because I don't want to give the impression that we're pushing 8-year-olds into a career pathway. But so that if students are interested, they have opportunities from those more formative years, from elementary and middle school, to start incorporating maybe more health medicine related curriculum. So I would love to see the PLTW curriculum starting to be implemented at the lower levels, so we can kind of push them even further when they get into the high school level. I would love to see opportunities for additional certifications. And this is something I'm discussing with the other biomed teacher now. Certifications that we haven't traditionally considered. So things like CPR certification. I think there's one for it's a program called Stop the Bleed. So giving students more opportunities to develop credentials, and also maybe increasing the number of workforce learning experiences, workplace learning experiences.
Yeah, workplace learning. Yeah, I know exactly.
Learning.
They're coming back with field experience too. Sure.
Yeah, we have a decent number of students who co-op, but building maybe even more opportunities like in our existing curriculum. So it's not something that they do in addition to biomed, but something that is embedded already, like as part of our program.
Well, I really, really appreciate your time. I already know how amazing you are, and the efforts and the work that you put in, and the tireless, relentless efforts that those are. And I really appreciate you sharing just kind of your classroom and a snippet today for everybody else to just kind of understand, because sometimes career and technical education gets forgotten about in a way. And we obviously value and appreciate the people in the field doing the work that we help create in the high school setting and in the secondary level. But it's nice to kind of paint the picture of, wow, this is really what's going on behind these walls and in these walls, and what we're doing for kids. So I'm just glad you're ours, and please never leave. Year 9 of hopefully forever the rest of your career. And thank you so much for your time today, Mrs. Howell.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.